You're fired.
Really?
Don't cry in my office.
The French Dispatch comes from acclaimed director Wes Anderson, but how does it rank among his other films? A love letter to journalists set in an outpost, an American newspaper in a fictional 20th century French city that brings life a collection of stories published in the French Dispatch magazine. I was very excited for this film. I love Wes Anderson's style of directing. It's so colorful, it's so stylistic, not in like a douchey way. It's just fun. It's refreshing. It's warm. I love his movies. I haven't seen all of them, but what I've seen, they've been fantastic. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox. I love Isle of Dogs. I love The Grand Budapest Hotel. I love Moonrise Kingdom. I've loved everything I've seen from Wes Anderson so far. So I was very excited to see this film, and I had a lot of fun with The French Dispatch. But I will say, this is probably one of my least favorite films from him. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. Don't quote me saying, oh, Dave thinks The French Dispatch is bad because he thinks it's one of Wes Anderson's worst films. That's not what I'm saying. This is still a great addition to his film collection. So let's talk about the things I loved. I just love the directing again. I know I just talked about it, but I just love how everything's so colorful. Everything is so symmetrical and it fits his style so well. Right when the movie started, I just had a big smile on my face. I just feel like anytime you're watching a Wes Anderson movie, you're transported to this fantasy world. And everything's just funny, everything's quippy, everything is just quick shot. It's just a great style that is just so refreshing. And this is one of the most Wes Anderson films that Wes Anderson's ever made. It makes complete sense if you've seen a lot of his movies. It's a film that not much actually happens in the whole scheme of things, but you're never really bored because it's paced so well because of the directing and the style of all of that. I'll talk about the performances now. There's not one I'm gonna pinpoint because this has a huge cast. You thought Dune had a huge cast. I mean, go watch The French Dispatch. And it's not a surprise though. I think the last 5 Wes Anderson movies, or maybe even all of them, have had a ridiculous cast. You'll get an A-list celebrity playing a role that lasts for 30 seconds. And it's awesome. It makes it 20 times better. It makes it fucking hilarious. This film is extremely funny though, but you're not surprised to hear that from me. All of Wes Anderson films are so funny because of his own style. It works so well with the way he directs scenes, the comedic timing, the dialogue. It's fucking great. It's very funny, but at the same time, there are parts throughout the film that actually get kind of dramatic, and it changes the tone of some scenes. And Wes Anderson's done that before in his other films. He does it here. He does a great job with that as well. This film has a unique style to tell its story because there really is no story. It's 3 mini Wes Anderson stories put into a film. In a weird way, it's somewhat charming. But at the same time, that's kind of my main issue with the film. Since there's 3 mini stories put in here, overall as a narrative, sometimes can get a little bit boring. I know I said before in this review that you're never really bored in this film because of the style of directing, and I do agree with that. But with the other Wes Anderson films, even though the narrative could be a little bit crazy, not very cinematic, there was something there. With The French Dispatch, since there's 3 mini-stories here, overall the narrative just isn't as interesting as other Wes Anderson films. And I get that's what they're going for, and I do think there are times where it really works. It's like they're reading a magazine article to us, and we're watching it play out in front of us. I get that. But sometimes that doesn't always work, and it makes the experience overall not as fun as other Wes Anderson films. This is probably a Wes Anderson film that I don't know if I'm going to rewatch. I feel like every Wes Anderson film I've watched before, I would easily say I would rewatch. With The French Dispatch, I had a fun time with it, but I don't really know if I would rewatch it, and that's really surprising for me to say. The French Dispatch was another great addition to Wes Anderson's filmography, but unfortunately, it is probably one of my least favorite films from Wes Anderson. I'm not saying this film is bad at all. Do not quote me saying this film is bad. I had a good time with The French Dispatch. Any Wes Anderson film you're going to have fun with because of his style of directing. It's so unique, everything's symmetric. Once you see a Wes Anderson film, you know what I'm talking about. He has perfect timing with his comedic scenes. It's always a great time, and that's the same thing with The French Dispatch. I cannot pinpoint a performance, but every single one is fantastic. This is the biggest cast we've seen all year. I mean, it's fucking mind-blowing how many people are in this film. It's a charming way to tell their story because there really isn't a story. It's 3 mini Wes Anderson stories into one film. It's like The French Dispatch magazine is right in front of it and we're reading the stories in the magazine. And sometimes that really works, but my only issue is sometimes it doesn't work, which makes the overall narrative not as fun as other Wes Anderson films. But in the end though, once again, I had fun with another Wes Anderson film. It's a film that you just sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself. I'll give The French Dispatch 7.5 Davy Daves. Definitely not as good as some of his recent entries, but still another great addition to Wes Anderson's filmography. I'm excited to see what he does next. So, The French Dispatch. Let me know what you guys thought of it. If you've seen it, I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Davy Dave's Takes.